It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Oh, hello there. Heidi, ho there. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? In case you're wondering why I might sound a little bit funnier than usual anyway, is because I'm not in the studio. I am out of town, and I'm using one of these little handheld portable kind of recorders just to do the intro to the show, since all the interviews are pre-recorded, and I just couldn't get back to the studio in time to do my intro. So here we are. We've got 2 interviews today and a special song. First one up is Douglas Vermeeren, and Douglas is an entrepreneur and a filmmaker. He's got a new film out called How Thoughts Become Things, and he talks about success and about his rags to riches story. It's a very good story. Stay tuned for that. He will be followed by Wendy. Wendy is a fantasy writer who's got a new novel out called Sage, and it'll be coming out in July, according to her. You can find out more about Wendy and go to roguepoet.net, roguepoet.net. Before we get to the interviews, we've got a special track by Don Carnaval, who we've featured on the show before, some of his music. He's got a new track out appropriately titled The Ballad of Quarantine, and it's a good track. I thought it was appropriate, so we're going to play that at the beginning of the show. So lots to get to. Here is The Ballad of Quarantine by Don Carnaval, followed by Douglas Vermeeren and Wendy Ann.
One day, the clouds will roll away. Again, the sun will shine. Time melts your heart away. What's left then will decay, passing through extraordinary times. It's a torrid phase for those who are tired. Bears down what your mind desires, slows you down, way down deep into your soul. No one wants to watch it burn. There must be something we can learn, passing through extraordinary times. Look around, you're not here, and we're drowning in the sea of fear. Thinking out loud, now someone has to pay. Nothing else to do but worry. We're slowly falling in a hurry, passing through extraordinary times. extraordinary times.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions, and you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Douglas Vermeeren. Hey, how are you, Douglas?
Hey, it's good to be with you, Doug.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. You are the only other Douglas that I've ever had on the show, which I think is interesting because we've been on
That's awesome.
for 5 years, and it's not that uncommon of a name. I can't believe that we've never had another Douglas on this show, except for me.
Well, we're going to have to make this episode really, really special then, aren't we?
Yes, I think we are. Let's see. I watched your film. You've got a film out called How Thoughts Become Things. It was very interesting, but I'm not sure I quite got it. I'm working on it in my head. Before we get to the film, though, can you just give us a quick backstory of yourself, what you've been up to for your life?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get to your film.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of for me, my journey is a little bit unique. I grew up in a family with, we were stuck in the poverty pattern, meaning my parents worked really hard. We were not wealthy. My father worked in construction. My mom babysat kids in the home. And at some points, my dad had as many as 4 jobs just trying to support our family. Like, there just wasn't a lot of money. So when I was around 19, I ran into a book called Think and Grow Rich. I'd never heard of personal development or any of these things before, but the book literally changed my life. And not just the concepts in it, but I decided at that point that I wanted to do what Napoleon Hill had done to write the book. He went out and he interviewed 400 of the world's top achievers in his day. So I decided to go do the same. So as a 19-year-old, I went out and I sought, business leaders and athletes and celebrities and people who'd achieved amazing things. And I got some of the biggest names in the world, and it literally changed my life. And as a result, people started asking me to kind of speak about it and share how did I turn my life around from being broke and in poverty to being a multimillionaire and also having these people in my life. Like, how did you connect with an Oprah Winfrey or Richard Branson or, Warren Buffett or these big names? How did you get to interview them? And so it was really kind of the beginning of a journey. And then naturally, we've had a chance to produce a couple of movies. This is the 4th one that we're talking about today, How Thoughts Become Things. But I think it's an important message because even as a young man, I noticed a massive shift in my thoughts, which ultimately created a brand new outcome for me. And the cool thing is anyone can do it. So that's a little bit of me in a nutshell.
You obviously were very privileged to be able to speak with all those people. You mentioned Oprah and you mentioned Warren Buffett. Was there a common thread between people like that you noticed? Because I've read things that said that people like that are incredibly motivated, they're workaholics, they have, there's some common things about those types of people, the very successful, very rich people. Did you notice that?
Definitely I did. And in fact, it's funny, I've written several books on it already, and we also do a program which is now top rated in the planet. In fact, we're rated among the top 3 personal development courses that a person can take of all time. And I'm not surprised, because if you think about it, if you interview one successful person or even 10, you're going to have a few common attributes. But when you get to 400, there are many what I call success markers that must be present in order for a person to attain high levels of success. Now, by the way, you mentioned, are they workaholics? The truth is yes, they are driven, but most of them understand that it's not the work or even the time that they put in that creates the results. It's learning how to create systems and learning how to create networks, meaning other people. And in fact, one of the biggest aha moments for me in creating success is that most of it comes when we surround ourselves with people who think at high levels, people who perform at high levels, people who are passionate and very good at what they do. And my mission has actually become in life now to surround myself with people who are far smarter than me. In fact, one of my favorite interviews was with a fellow named Bill Bartman. He started his company while he was on welfare. He and his wife literally borrowed $1,700, and in a rented flat, like a rented apartment, they came up with this idea for a company, and he became the 25th wealthiest man in the USA at one point. And so the thing that he told me, which I thought was really interesting, he says, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And so it's very important that we're always seeking to surround ourselves with the very, very best and brightest. And one of my favorite common attributes that no one ever talks about in the success books that all top achievers have is that they're curious. So they're learners. They want to always be in a state of, let's call it market research. They want to know what they can do better and how they can serve people better and how they can make the systems they're using better and their products better. They're always in a constant pursuit of, how can I fix this, right? Even if it's perfect, they're looking for, how can I make it better, right? And I think a lot of people are just easily satisfied, and that's why they never rise to high levels.
Well, I was just going to say that. I was going to say that complacency is probably not one of the traits or attributes of people like that.
No. In fact, I was just chatting with a young entrepreneur who's actually asking me to be a consultant for his business and maybe even on the board of directors. And something he said that immediately turned me off, that just didn't work. He says, well, if it's 70% there, we can release it. People will get over it. We'll work the bugs out of it in the future. And that's not really, I'm not saying that top achievers are perfectionists. They're not. They're improvisers. But they're always looking to release the very best that they can. They're not looking for good enough. Good enough never makes lasting success. It never creates powerful word of mouth or an experience where people go, wow. And that's what top achievers have in common. They're always looking to create a wow, if you will, right? They don't want to be known for creating something that's mediocre. And I think that it's almost a betrayal to ourselves. We get this great inspiring idea, and then we put it out as mediocre. Come on, that doesn't work, right?
No. Okay, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here, because there have been a lot of people like Tony Robbins, I think, is one that comes to mind, and people who have done, get rich, self-help, improve yourself. There's lots and lots of it out there. What works for one person may not necessarily work for somebody else. After watching your film, you made it seem very simple, which is great, but it can't be that simple. Because if it was, then everybody would be rich.
This is hilarious that you say that too. And the funny thing that I've noticed with most people who never attain success, it's because they make it too complex, right? They're looking for all the details. They're looking to make sure that they've got everything perfect. And so therefore they never take action. Here's the deal: is the system and the steps are pretty much the same for everyone. But the way that you approach it and the authenticity, like let's use the example of riding a bike. How many ways are there really to ride a bike? You sit down, you get on, and you pedal, right? Now, where you go will be up to you, right? Where you go and who you ride with and how far you go. And who knows, maybe there's some authenticity, let's call it variety, some tricks that you do. Maybe you do whatever it is that you do on a bike that's a trick. But the real fundamentals of it will always remain the same. And I think that we have been able to see this not just in my film, but through the history of the world, right? I kind of love what Aristotle said. He said that simplicity is the most complex thing on the earth, right? Simplicity is the most complex thing to achieve. Now, I'm paraphrasing. We're not translating from Greek anyways, but the problem, I think, is that most people look for a formula beyond, right? And that's why they fail. In fact, I think one of the biggest, if we were to look at the other end of the spectrum, what's the biggest cause for failure? Well, sure, we can cite things like doubt. We can cite things like fear. We can cite things like a lack of knowledge. I mean, these are all pretty good excuses, right? But I'm going to say that the number one reason why people fear is self-doubt. They just figure, I'm not qualified to do it. I need to know more. I need to understand more. I need to have more support. I need more money. I need more. You fill in the blank. And so therefore, they don't even really go beyond the initial questioning, right? Now, let me share with you something that was really profound about success that blew my mind when I learned it with the top achievers. I had a mentor, and I'm still friends with him. He's worth about $800 million. Wow. That's okay. You can live on that, right?
Sure.
So anyways, he says to me this one day, he says, the problem with most entrepreneurs is they ask the wrong questions as they get started. The questions always include I, and they always include the words what and how. So how can I, what can I do, what do I need to understand, it's all I, and it's all what and how questions. He said, if you want to grow beyond what you're doing, your questions need to shift to who, not what or how, but who. So who can help me with this? Who knows how to do this? Who has a system? Who can I partner with? Who can I joint venture with? Who has my customers? Who has, right? And the minute that we understand that all great success actually comes as a result of a team, not an individual, is when we begin to make progress. If you look at it, no one's ever climbed Mount Everest by themselves. It's always been a group of people. No one's ever gone to the moon by themselves. It's always, again, been a group of people. No one's ever won an Olympic gold medal by themselves. Again, it's been trainers and coaches and nutritionists, and it's always a group. And so if we're ever trying to solve this equation on our own, we're always going to be limited, right? And so I think that, you know, this whole idea since the beginning of time and success, it's not really a new idea. Sure, there's been a lot of people who've maybe packaged it differently, so to speak, but they've always, you know, generally, made it more complex than it needs to be. And so that's why I think our film is a very refreshing and accessible breath of fresh air.
So what was it that you did? What was the first thing you did? Go back to, you said you grew up in a very modest household, struggling for money, your parents were. What was the first thing you did that you achieved a level of success?
Well, I think the first thing that I did, if I could really attribute my success to any one thing, is that I became a good listener. I'll never forget that actually I had a mentor, and I had an idea for a business that I wanted to do. And so, he said, yeah, come over and talk about it. So I immediately thought I got to come up with a business plan, and I've got to have something really significant to present to him in terms of, you know, the paperwork and all of these things. And so I built, and I thought thick equaled quality. So I built this really like two-inch document that I brought to him and everything else. Well, after a little while, he took a look at it. He pointed out a bunch of challenges and problems, but every step along the way, I argued to hang on to my problems. Like from an ego point of view, I said, no, this is why it needs to be this way, blah, blah, blah. Well, for the first few minutes, he let me defend myself. That was fine. But ultimately, he put up his hand and he simply said, you can be rich or you can be right. You can't be both. And then he said, and this was maybe a bit hurtful at the time, but what a wow, aha, right? He said, let's take bank statements, because our bank statement is a report card of how well we understand these things. Take a look at mine, take a look at yours. Are there some things that you're willing to learn? And if you're willing to learn, you will be able to duplicate what I have done. So he showed me his bank statement, and it was a report card. It was far bigger than mine. In fact, I think at the time, as this 19-year-old just getting started, I might have been somewhere around, $175 in my bank account, right? And his was, again, multi figures. And so I just determined there that the first step that I could do in anything is just to learn. Now, where is money made? If we're talking about money, there's really only 5 key areas where money is made for anyone. Certainly getting into the big details, we won't have the time on this show, but let me just point out that money is made in either business, real estate, investment, your intellectual property, meaning your ideas, or your networks. Those you're connected to. Those are the only places you can ever make money. And the interesting thing about today's economy is that 84% of all self-made millionaires are made through a business, right? So I think it's very important that people recognize that they should, whether it's, as a side hustle in addition to their regular job, or maybe even it's their full-time effort, they need to understand the skills around business, and they need to have a business. And even if you are working for someone, you are the business. And if you're not providing massive value to your employer, chances are you'll be replaced. So I think that's really one of the key fundamental things we need to understand. Back to this value proposition, how are you delivering this wow experience, if you will, to those that you're entering into transactions with? And the more you can do that, whether you're an employee or a business owner, the more successful you're going to be.
I've always heard that you can never be rich to the point of independence by working for somebody else. And it seems like most of the richest people are entrepreneurial. Well,
can I just share the whole problem with the equation? This is it, is that in schools, we are taught that finances is definitely attached as an equation to our time or our education. And the truth is that's not correct in either case. Time never does equal money. In fact, I love what John D. Rockefeller said one time. He says, most people are working so hard or so much that they don't have the time to become rich. Well, the truth is that, again, money is not attached to your time or your education. I know some people that have not even finished high school that are multimillionaires, right? So what is money attached to? That's the big question. And I'll tell you what it is. It's systems. It's systems. When we understand the systems that are used to create transactions, and that's really where money comes from, the exchange of, service, an asset or information for money, that's a transaction. How can we build a system around it? And the smart ones do it so that they can eliminate their time. Now, one of the things, if you Google right now, #1 passive income coach, it's me. I'm the guy that comes up. Money Magazine rated me as the #1 trainer for passive income. Now, I know passive income, a lot of people kind of give that a bit of a bad rep. And they say, it's a new thing now that the internet's come out. Well, no, it hasn't. Passive income, actually, by its formal name, is called leveraged income, and it's existed since the beginning of time. And what it means is a simple and systematized approach to transactions. So the more that you can create a transaction around, let's say, again, you've got a rental property. Well, if you can get a management company, there's your system. You no longer have to worry about collecting rent and doing maintenance on the property. Really simple example, right? So there's a lot of opportunities out there that we can really systematize our income. And man, if we had time, I could tell you a little bit more about that, because there's really only two ways to systematize anything, and that's either you delegate it to somebody or you automate it using technology. Those are your only two choices. And so when you can do that, all of a sudden you remove your time and effort from the equation of making money, and you can become extremely rich. And I might also add that if you are a business owner right now, you cannot scale, you cannot grow until you understand the power of systems. As soon as you are attached to it, as soon as you're a cog in the wheel, you become a clog in the wheel. And you need to find a way to eliminate yourself from the transaction as best as you can.
Now, you just made a film. You said you've made several films. Let me switch this over to people in the creative arts, because that's primarily the people that we have on this show.
Cool.
One of the things that you mentioned was self-confidence. And I know I studied acting, I've been a musician my whole life, I've been a performer basically. Self-confidence is all you got in this business. And the people that have less talent but more confidence tend to be more successful in this business. Not always, but I've seen it. I've seen where people who maybe they weren't the best singer in the world, maybe they weren't the best actor in the world, but they had a certain way of convincing everybody that they were. Where there were these other people who could sing and make the angels cry. But once they were done, they went back into their dressing room and hid from everybody because they were so shy.
Well, I think there's truth to what you're saying, but I guess the one thing that I think is maybe a more common attribute than just the confidence, because I've got a lot of friends, in fact, I've got a couple of friends that have won significant awards, everything from an Academy to an Emmy, to you name it, and they are not big, confident people. In fact, even at social gatherings, they'll be the very last one to show up, right? Like they'll hide in the corner and they'll only go to the things that are absolutely mandatory and required. So they don't have that confidence and they aren't really people. But what the most common thing I've seen is the most successful people surround themselves by a team. I was having a conversation one time with a gentleman. I used to live in California, and obviously working in movies, I've got a lot of movie connections. So the conversation came up around Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah.
And they basically shared with me that Tom Cruise is not really an individual. He's a company. And I think that this is an important observation, is that Tom Cruise is really a group of individuals. And so he is a network. That's what he is. And so when people are hiring Tom Cruise, they get all of the brand that's been created by his publicist, his stylist, the past, films that he's done and everything else. And so you are buying a brand. So if we're looking at entertainment, I think the problem with many actors and actresses is they try to approach the industry as talent. Whereas what they don't understand is show business. That's the difference between talent and show business. And business is always going to be a matter of returns. So right now we're also working on a couple of other movies. I know I do the personal development films, but I've got a branch of my company that we also do mainstream Hollywood films. But when we're looking at casting, one of the things that we look at, specifically in today's marketplace, is what is their, let's call it social media credibility, right? Because we know if we've got someone who's got a large following and a massive audience, that generally that could translate into sales. Right, like that will translate into people who will support and come out to see it. And I'm not saying this to be silly, but we look at that oftentimes before we give this person an audition to see how talented they are. And if they don't have the following or the, let's call it the marketplace brand, there's really no point inviting them for the interview, right? There's no point auditioning them and doing screen tests. There's just no reason for it, right? And I guess that's kind of happened a little bit even in this movie that we're talking about here today, How Thoughts Become Things. I love the people that are in the film. They've been friends of mine for a long time, some of the biggest names in personal development. And they were invited because I knew by having them involved in the film that we could leverage that to attract attention. Now, are they the greatest teachers in the world? I don't know. Maybe there's some people that would debate that, they've got better information even than those people in the film. And they might. But, here's the thing is how can we really bring them in if no one's heard of them or no one really even cares? They may have the best information or even be the most talented, but if no one cares, why would you want to share their story, right?
Well, that's true. I want to hit on one point on your bio, and then we got to kind of wrap this up.
No problem.
I'll just read it to you. It says, for the first time ever, the film How Thoughts Become Things by noted filmmaker Doug Vermeeren will reveal the part of the equation that is missing. What is the missing link? What part is missing?
Well, I think there's a few that we don't talk about. There's a few. I think one of the biggest things that most people are having when they talk about the power of thought, most people don't understand how to really connect with that specific thought that they would like to bring into fruition. How do we really isolate and empower a thought? Because most people right now are just kind of, they're randomly on autopilot. And sure, we talk about, you need to become emotionally connected to a specific thought. We talk about how our programming up until now, and including right now, is generating those thoughts. We also talk about how our environment can affect our thoughts. But nobody's really taught about how can we, isolate the thought that we really want to bring about and then empower it and turn that into actual reality. How do we manifest it? And by the way, not just manifest it, but do it quickly, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. When I was a young man at 19, being broke, remember, I want to give this context, I was wearing hand-me-downs from people. I had a time when I went into a grocery store as this college student that I was, and I could not have my ATM card approved for $4.12. I'll never forget that. It was so embarrassing. But I went from that, get this, inside of 6 months to $1.6 million. That's almost $9,000 a day. So if you can manifest that inside of 6 months, and as a 19-year-old, right, you can now certainly do it even faster. And I recognize that there were some things that I didn't even know at that point. So I guess the big takeaway on that is, what are we revealing that no one's ever seen before? I'm going to really show you in this film how to attract what you want, to do it fast and quick, and to do it with very few obstacles, to really just show you that in reality, the universe has been expanding since the Big Bang. It's been, expanding bigger and bigger and bigger. The problem is most people live their life contrary to that. They contract, they constrict, they think small, and they fight against it. So how can you expand also in the same way the universe is? And we show you how to do that in this film. Oh,
and the website is, what is the website?
Yeah, it's the title of the movie, so www.howthoughtsbecomethings.com, howthoughtsbecomethings.com, and you've got a lot of incredible people there that you've already seen in films like The Secret. This is the continuation where they share you the next steps, what to do. If you enjoyed that film, The Secret, and it made a difference in your life and inspired you, this is the one that's now going to allow you to manifest your greatest self and all of the things that you've ever thought about, dreamed about, and wanted.
Super. Well, again, thank you so much, Doug, for coming on the show. Best of luck. I'm sure the film's going to be a hit. It's doing very well already, yeah?
Yes. In fact, right now, we've outsold the original film, The Secret, by 3 times. We're doing 3 times the number so far of what they've done, and most are expecting that it will become the ultimate top best-selling personal development film of all time. So we're very excited about that, but I think it has more to do with the content inside. The message goes far deeper, and it's more meaningful, and that's what's given us this really big success that we're experiencing now.
Well, super. All right. Well, the film, again, is called How Thoughts Become Things, and my guest is Doug Vermeeren. Thanks so much. This was very enlightening. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be with another Doug. I love it.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James, all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records, and it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Epps, EPPS, at talk, TALK, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you. Bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Wendy Ann. Hey, Wendy, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Doing just fine, thank you. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from Massachusetts.
Oh, Massachusetts, Worcester, right?
Close to, yeah, 30 minutes. I'm from Worcester originally, but I'm living in the Sturbridge area now.
Okay. Because your bio is a little bit vague when it just said hails from Worcester, and we get a lot of guests from the UK on. So I didn't know if it was Worcester, Massachusetts, or Worcester, England. So, okay. All right, well, that's good. Actually,
no, Worcester.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Worcester, New England.
Right, Worcester, New England. Well, actually, I'm from Boston. I grew up there. I wasn't born there, but I was raised there and lived there most of my life. I live in Vegas now, but I was there until 2005. So I'm very familiar with the area.
That's a lot of contrast, Vegas and Boston, so different from one another.
Well, yeah. I mean, I love New England, and I always feel like that's home. It's always going to be that way for me. But I just got tired of the winter. And finally, it just was, at a point where I was getting a little bit older and wanted to scale my life down. And I thought, why am I paying to heat this big house with all this furniture? I can move somewhere that's warmer, and I can spend the money on something else other than heating oil. So, I made the move. And I do miss the seasons, but I don't miss the 10 feet of snow. I lived in New Hampshire between Hudson and Nashua, and it just, the winter was just brutal. I just got tired of all that snow.
New Hampshire is absolutely stunning. I have done the back and forth between Tampa and Worcester for so many years because of that reason.
Yeah. It's great if you can just get out, like New Year's. I love the Thanksgiving there. I like Christmas. But, get on a plane New Year's Day and just go somewhere warm and then come back in April. And you're okay.
That's what most snowbirds do. If you're lucky enough, and I was for several years, to have a place in New England and one in Florida, that works out great, too.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And Florida, it's not that long of a flight either. It's not like going to Hawaii or even to California or something. Florida is fairly quick to get there.
They're so wonderfully contrasting, like Vegas and New England are. But my heart, like yours, is here. I love the Four Seasons. I write a lot about how beautiful New England is, because I feel like when you're in Florida, you start to, especially after like over a year, you start to miss like the hills, the constant state of like metamorphosis. You don't even have to move around in New England. It constantly changes around you, which makes it like beautiful,
Oh, I agree. I mean, living in Vegas, I just miss having a tree, because there is just absolutely nothing out here. I mean, it's its own beauty. The desert is its own beauty. And especially if you can get out there like right after it rains, which it doesn't do that often, but when it does rain, the desert just blooms. It's unbelievable. But it's few and far between, and the rest of the time it just looks like the surface of Mars. And
right now is lilac season, if you recall that up here. It's such a small time interval, like rain would be down there.
Right, exactly. So how are you doing with the virus? You staying at home?
Yep, we're properly quarantined at our house. The state of Massachusetts has recently started opening up, but I'm going to give it like an extra 2.5 weeks to see how everybody acclimates to this opening, or I should say reopening. But people here, the better part of, this pandemic, and when I say here, I mean my household, we've been resorting to like art, cooking, music, just ways that we haven't had time to like creatively express. So we've been really utilizing this as a tool to kind of bond as a unit, but also use our time to, create.
Do you have young children?
I don't. I was really young when I had a child, so my offspring was actually older than I was when I had her.
Oh, okay. No, because people that have young children that have been locked in the house for the last couple of months with no school are getting very creative with what they can do with their kids, because they're just not used to having them in the house for the whole day and night. And, kids don't have an attention span that, can work safely inside the house for 24 hours. Sometimes they just need to run around and get rid of their energy. But I've heard stories from parents, that they're finding all kinds of things to do.
Mine plays piano, guitar, and she likes to paint, and she's also got a degree in culinary art. So she's finding her time pretty useful, and I'm enjoying her time as well. She comes up with a new piece almost every day, be it a musical piece or but she really does prefer visual arts, like a computer graphics type of piece, and she cooks several days a week, and so she's been utilizing her talent during this time.
Well, that's great. So you've got a book. It's coming out June 1st. Is that correct?
It's actually coming out July 5th. I pushed it back a little bit due to the present circumstances.
And the book is called?
Sage.
Sage. Okay. Why don't you tell us about it?
Well, I originally wrote the book in 2009, which I was at a completely different place in my evolution. And I became incredibly busy for about almost a decade, just a little over 9 years. And finally had the time to pick it back up. It was a roughly 68,000 word novel at that time, and predominantly based on like things that increase dopamine, like erotica and mystery and things like that, which I left in there and cleaned up, in fact. But by the time I picked it back up, I was at a different state of my evolution, and had encountered more knowledge pertaining to the things that I had lightly traversed when I had started. And I put a lot of that evolution in there. So now it's about double the size. My editing process was basically adding all of that evolution and critiquing what was there. And some profound changes were that I used to drink when I wrote the rough draft. And I haven't for 7 years. And what a difference that made, looking at that with sober eyes and more mature eyes when I edited. Also, you know, I knew more about some of the things that I loved, but didn't really have time to delve into, like Greek mythology and Egyptology, and I'm an eclectic spiritualist, and, you know, at that time, I had lightly, sought information regarding those things, but I have really dove pretty deep regarding that stuff, and all in all, I decided that, you know, not just the book itself, but the sequels to the book would be have that sentiment in mind, meaning like an ascension process. So I decided to turn it into a 4-part series whereby it's from sex to love on the first, and the second is from chaos to peace, and the third from darkness to light, and the fourth from sickness to health. So although this one incorporates all of those things, it's just, you know, the overtone, the one that carries it across is, you know, predominantly from, you know, erotica to love.
Are there recurring characters in this, or I'm just having trouble kind of putting together in my mind what I would expect if I picked up the book and started reading it?
The answer is that, you know, the characters will be in each of them. The main characters are themselves the names of each book. So the first one, Sage, she's a 21st century woman who is both a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, but she's pretty esoteric too. And so, you know, a combination of those things and the fact that I use kind of like a 1940s style inner monologue to depict what's going on with her interpretation of things, and the fact that she's into New Age, so it gives me a platform to allow her to do like things like past life regression, where she, you know, receives the world as herself 2,000 years sooner. Basically, it goes back and forth between two dimensions. The 21st dimension, where she is, you know, her organic self, as what I just described, and her previous life in Egypt, where she's a priestess. I web those two things back and forth until she realizes, well, I don't want to give too much away regarding that dynamic, but she realizes who she truly is, what her immortal energy entails. And once she realizes this, that cliche phrase that is currently used now called woke happens. And once that happens, it gives me, you know, the ability to allow the reader to ascend with her. And each character, like the second will be Lily. Sage will be in that, but she won't be a main character anymore. Lily will be. And the next will be Terry, and the fourth will be Trina. And those characters are the avatars that take you across these ascension aspects of their growth, of their...
This sounds like it would make a fantasy type movie, yeah? Or could.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like
some of the readers have said that.
It sounds like one of the type of book that you'd really have to pay attention reading it, because it seems like it kind of bounces around all over the place. And you could easily get lost, it sounds like. I don't know. I haven't read it, but just the way you're describing it.
Well, I mean, when I'm giving you a concise synopsis of it, I can see where that would seem that way. But so far, I feel like it's pretty fluid. It does work pretty organically. I mean, it's a pretty thick novel, so it does give you enough time to acclimate. It does give you enough time to catch up. And there is something in there, like on a more basic, mundane level as well as spiritual. So, like, if you're, into the more, basic constraints of the human mind, there's something in there for everybody. But what I tried to do was, like, tailor it to, like, 3 levels of reading. Like, for me, I like history, and I love innuendos. And so I did I'm a poet, first of all. So, a poet writing a novel it's an interesting thing to, like, surmise, because I'm used to layers. I'm used to using layers as a way to kind of, like, hide metaphors and so on and so forth. So if you're a poet, you'll understand some of the hidden innuendos in there, but it doesn't mean that they prevent you from being able to read it organically and moving on to the next. Like, it's about 6 chapters before she even, of character bonding and building before anything of any significant travel happens. Like, so it does organically move you through before, it starts spinning you in all the directions.
No, that helps, because when you first described it, I couldn't quite follow you, but now I get it. Okay, now it makes more sense. Tell me a little bit about your process. Are you one of these people that can just sit down, at a specific time and say, okay, I'm going to write? Or does something have to inspire you to do it? I mean, I know with a book, once you get going, it's more of okay, let's just build on this and build on this. The inspiration probably was what started the book. But I don't know. I've heard with some people, they get to a point where they're writing and the creativity shuts off and they can't get going again. I mean, I don't know. How is it for you?
I feel like my creativity is like on a perpetual cycle all of the time. I feel that, writing poetry is something that unclogs my mind if I do have writer's block. And it's also something that I can commit to at any point in time. So,
that's great.
As far as writing a novel is concerned, my life has to be relatively organized. Like, my living space has to be organized. I have to be in the right frame of mind in order to do it. But once I am, it does tend to flow out really fast. In fact, it flows out so fast that I use a notebook to keep up with the thoughts in my mind. It's just that I have to actually be in the right frame of mind to do something of that nature. And I think it's because you do depend on your left mind a little bit more when you're writing novels. With poetry, it's you can be as esoteric as you want. You can be as vague as you want. And it's almost like a Morse code type of writing. Other poets will understand it, and people with like minds will get it, but it really does come from your heart, and you don't have to take much time or have much organization in order to come up with a product. Whereby with, like, writing an actual fiction, you have to have some semblance of organization, relative peace, and inspiration is always there for me. I don't know. I feel like this is true for a lot of writers, too. I think the reason we write is because we almost have to. We're so in touch with our 7 senses. We're so in tune with those things that we think about the smell and the taste and the sight and the feeling and the thought on a constant basis. And there's so much reprieve in being able to, like, put it down, to either write it or speak it or whichever creative outlet somebody uses. So the inspiration is always there. And the need to write is always there, too, but it is a little bit more complicating as it pertains to writing an actual novel.
Has the virus shutdown situation, was that a benefit for you or not? in terms of, well, now I have more time to write because I'm at home? Or did it make any difference?
That's a really good question. It's been quite a paradox, honestly. I do find that I'm in the midst of a lot of transitions in my personal life. And so I did go from a situation where I didn't have any time and it felt like I had no freedom to finally I have time and finally I have freedom, and look at this, we're in quarantine now. So that was interesting. I'm glad to be where I am now with my lifelong best friend, and to have more personal time to myself. But I'm also one of those people who, and I'm extroverted, and I also enjoy getting out. And so I can't wait until I can finally sit on the coast of Gloucester, or go to Purgatory Chasm with my notebook, or just be in an actual place outside of quarantine that'll get my creative juices flowing again. So far, being able to move everything and set up shop, those things have been keeping me going, especially speaking to other creative minds, which has been such a blessing. That's been helping me through it. But I really am desperately craving, I was supposed to be in Ireland this month to get inspiration for the sequel.
Oh.
And that was incredibly postponed. And Vegas, I was supposed to be there. In fact, I had to, I made a deposit and everything to go to the Venetian in Vegas last month, with the intention to get some inspiration there as well. And one of the most beautiful things I've ever done was take a helicopter over the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
haven't
it is pretty
done that
spectacular.
since 2004, but for some reason, just the idea of doing that and jumping off the stratosphere again, those couple of things to unclog my mind, that was my intention. So
I was just going to say regarding Vegas, they are starting to open very, very slowly. The casinos is kind of a logistics problem, and they're putting plastic partitions between all the players at the blackjack tables, which looks incredibly ridiculous. And it also looks very difficult to try to play cards that way. The problem is, if you don't want to come in July and August, because it'll be 115 degrees.
No.
And it's just, that's not the kind of inspiration I would wish on anybody. So I think you'd be better off at this point, wait till around October, and maybe by then this virus thing will have calmed down, and then come. Then it's a better time, because Vegas in the summer is just awful. See, I traded New England winter for Vegas summer. The only good part is that Vegas summer is shorter. That's the only advantage to it being in New England, because New England, the winter seems to be about 8 months. But
this winter especially, it wasn't there wasn't a ton of snow this winter, but it has to have been one of the longest ones. We had snow until May this year.
Yeah, that is rare. I can only remember a couple of times when it snowed in May. That isn't very usual at all. We do have to kind of wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out so people can come check you out, check out the book?
Oh, yeah, sure. My website is roguepoet.net, ROGUE poet.net.
Okay. And do you have any social media pages you want to give out?
I was just going to say, all my social media are connected to that site. So the Instagram and Facebook and all of that is on there. Some of them are still in their fetal position. I haven't really spent a lot of time social networking in the past 10 years. So, but yeah, they're in their beginning process right now. So too is the beginning process of the sequel. So doing both of those things simultaneously right now.
Well, Wendy Ann, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Best of luck with the book. Again, the book is called Sage. And you said it'll be out in July now?
Yes, July 5th is the final release date, yeah.
July 5th. Okay, very good. Thank you again for coming on. This was fun talking to you. Take care.
Thank you. It was lovely. Bye.
To the mile, you've got to run, not walk. To give a sermon, you've got to preach, not talk. To reach the mountain, you've got to climb, not dream. To say you love me, you've got to speak, not scream. All the way on love, can't do it just halfway. All the way on love, it's a big price to pay. All the way on love, if you feel it, then they can stay. 'Cause all the way on love, find salvation, you got to pray, not pay. Forget the answer, it can't be found that way. Love was simple, we'd have it every day. So keep on searching, and clear will come from grace. All the way on love, can't do it just halfway. All the way on love, oh, it's a big old price to pay. All the way on love, if you feel it, then make it stay. 'Cause all the way on love. So hold on tight and learn to give, not take. Just keep it real and learn to make, not break. You think it's easy, life is upside down. It's when they'll tell you you've got to turn